Howdy, friends and family. Thanks so much for joining me again. This is week 4, day 1 in the series I'm doing with Christ Memorial Lutheran Church about knowing God. And last week we talked about how God is sovereign over all things, and this week we are talking about how God is sufficient. So my passage from today comes from 2 Corinthians chapter 12, and we are reading verses 7 through 10. And it says, "To keep me from becoming conceited, because of these surpassingly great revelations, there was given me a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But he said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong.'" So Paul here is telling us that he was given a thorn in his side, some sort of hardship that he had to deal with, and he asked God to take it away. He wanted it gone, so much that he asked 3 times. But God said no. God's response was, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Paul's thorn, whatever it was, made him weak. And God got the glory because of that. Because Paul was weak, people saw God's power working and not Paul's power. Paul was faced with situations that he did not feel strong enough to handle. But God said, "My grace is sufficient for you." Sufficient means enough to meet the needs of a situation or a proposed end. So God is telling Paul that no matter what he goes through, his grace is sufficient to get him through that situation. And Paul's response, I love this, is to delight in his weakness, in his hardships, his persecutions. He knew that when he was weak, it was God's power working through him that people saw. And so he took delight in his weakness. He took delight in his thorn, knowing that it was God working through him. So this week I call you to do 2 things. First, I call you to trust God as your all-sufficient one. Trust that his grace is enough to get you through any situation or any task he could ask you to do. But secondly, I call you to delight in your weaknesses. This is not easy. It is very hard to try and find joy when you don't feel prepared for something, or when you're going through something hard that hurts, or when you maybe have a temptation that you really wish would just go away. It is hard to find joy and to delight in that moment, but I call you to delight in it. Find joy in it. Because when you do that, when you allow God to work through your weakness, to let his power fill in the gaps that you can't fill in, you see God working, and people will come to know God. So I call you to do that this week. 2 Corinthians 12:9 is a great verse to memorize if you're looking for something to memorize. And also if you're looking for a book, these 2 books, God's Smuggler and The Calling, are great ones. They're both by Brother Andrew, and they talk about a missionary and how God is sufficient for him through many hardships and trials that he has to go through. Thanks so much for joining me, and I will see you guys next time.